Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Reate Knives Bushido, or Bushido, or I think it's Bushido, like Toledo. Somebody said that in a comment thread. Anyways, first off though, I want to thank very, very much my Patreon patrons. They make it possible for me to see a knife like this and go, yeah, I should probably pick one up. Also, I want to thank Knife Joy, by the way, for just grabbing one like, oh, you've got him. I should get one of those. Okay. So I appreciate very much that. So next thing, let's do some size comparison real quick. This is not actually a particularly large knife. Here it is against the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, the Spyderco Delica, and so what we see here is in terms of effective blade length, a little longer than the Delica, a little shorter than the PM2, but in terms of handle size, reasonably small. And then actually we'll put it up next to the Ontario Rat number 2. And we see actually almost identical in blade length as well as overall profile. So it's not a particularly large knife. It's a little deceptive if you just look at it in pictures and whatnot, but it is not a particularly big knife. And then actually one other thing that is worth comparison here is the Reate produced Pena Knives X Series. This is the front flipper Zulu, actually. But these knives have actually a little bit more in common than you might think. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Next thing, let's talk a little bit about the design here. This is a Reate design. And actually there was, just so I can head this off at the pass, when this first released, there was a little bit of controversy in that Guy Paghetti, as well, Guy probably Paghetti, as well as Editions G, raised some alarms about some similarities to an existing model. My understanding is that everybody sat down at the table and everybody walked away very satisfied, and there are no hard feelings anywhere around this. But nonetheless, that was something that came up, but it doesn't appear to have been an ongoing issue here. And so, yeah, just so we know that's not a factor, and it doesn't figure into any of this here. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. So start off on the good side. This guy is actually a very nice little size. Given I'm a little bit biased towards smaller knives, this is a known fact, but the blade length on this guy is pretty uncontroversially under 3 inches, which is going to make it legal in a lot more places. And so that's a beautiful thing. But it's also just a very nice carryable little piece. It's a little bit on the thicker side than you might expect otherwise because of these thicker burlap scales. But you know what? It works well, and it has a fine clip here, which is not the deepest carry option in the world, but it is a very nice piece in the pocket and is very easy to carry, and so that's great. Next thing, this has a very nice action to it. This is a front flipper pocket knife, and there are a couple of ways you can open it. You can do the kind of lighter method, where you flick it open like a lighter, but you can also do, this one is quite vulnerable to the index finger approach, where you kind of reach your index finger around, and then if I can do this on camera, there we go. You give it just a little bit of a backwards force like that, and the knife will come flying open there. And actually, I found myself using both of those on a pretty regular basis when carrying this. So this is actually, it's got a very nice action. Then in terms of the close, this is very smooth. Even without a whole heck of a lot of use, it's already smoothing in very nicely. And honestly, one of the nice things about this guy is that as a liner lock, it's not vulnerable to one of the major issues that front flippers have, which is that if your fingers are resting, if this were a frame lock, like, for instance, this Concept Knives Sprite that happens to be on my table, then you could be holding it, and then, this isn't a front flipper, of course, but holding it, pressing down on the lock bar there, which increases the detent force, makes it harder to deploy, whereas on this guy, that's not a factor. The liner lock is very nice, and honestly, I'm kind of glad to see liner locks having a renaissance, partly for that reason alone. So there's that. Partly for that reason alone. Let's not think about that sentence too much, shall we? Next thing, this guy has a very nice deployment. Like I mentioned, you can do the index finger thing, you can do the thumb thing, or you can use that prominence at the top, but there are lots of other ways that you can open a knife like this, but I appreciate that you've got that versatility and that it sticks up a little bit more than that. There are definitely front flipper knives out there in the world that are that don't have that, but the detent is dialed in very well for that. It makes it a little bit nicer, that is, and a little bit easier to do that, even with the relatively harder detent on this. They've dialed this in very well as a front flipper, and that's actually not as common as you'd think. Next thing, I gotta say, I love this micarta. So they also had a version of this in carbon fiber, but this is the burlap micarta version. So this is layers of burlap with a resin in between them, coupled with an M390 blade that's got a little bit of a stonewash to it, or I'm sorry, a satin feeling to it. Like they've done what almost appears to be a hand-rubbed blade finish. It might be a hand-rubbed blade finish. I don't know how they were rubbing it, but nonetheless, it is a very nice-looking piece. It has a little bit of air of traditionality, although it's got the samurai thing going on pretty heavily. I think that looks quite attractive there, and that brings it to the final point, which is the design of this guy. It's a classic, right? It's going to appeal a lot to Japanophiles, martial arts types, as well as folks who recreationally woo. But at the same time, I think this is going to be a piece that's going to have a lot of appeal pretty broadly, and it's going to be interesting to people who are kind of tired of the Western tradition of knife making. Personally, I'm not, and personally, it doesn't speak to me as well, but I think for a lot of folks, it really is. And so this is going to be a design that's going to be very appealing to a number of people, and I think that could be a beautiful thing. So, couple all that with the fit and finish that Reate is kind of known for, that I didn't even write down because I assume at this point, but it's damn near perfect, if not perfect. Centered and all that. The classic design, the micarta hand rub combo here, the good deployment with the nice action and the great size, all combined to make this pretty damn good. But to me, at least, the very best part of this knife is the blade, as you would kind of hope, right? Reate for a while was a little bit thicker behind edges, but oh boy, have they gotten better at this. The grinding on this guy is good. Not only do we have a little bit of a swedge here, but we have a relatively thin grind coming down to a nice thin edge with a thin tip here, a good sharpening choil on it that works quite well, reasonable stock thickness, and M390. All of that makes this a knife that cuts very effectively. There is absolutely not a damn thing wrong with this blade, and as a result, I'm very impressed with that. So to me, what's great about this knife is that blade. On the bad side, to start with, we'll talk about the price, which is fine. It's $235. Now, actually, I'm kind of borderline about this. A lot of really great pieces are now available in the 150 to 200 range, and I'd say if this guy came in at 200 or 180, I'd be like, whoa, that's value. This is in that class of prices that is fine. They're not ripping my face off, but it's not blowing me away. It's solid. It's fine. I think that people who want this knife are going to pay that kind of money for it, and that they will be fine with it. It's just, yeah. So anyways, the price is there. Next thing, the lanyard hole on this does feel lazy. Honestly, I think this knife would be way more attractive had they not been like, well, we need a lanyard, brrr, and then they just drill through there. I mean, there are so many ways that you can hide a lanyard these days. Do I have any of them on my table right now that are doing that? No, but there are a billion ways to build lanyard holes into the backspacer. Just drill a hole through the thing. That could have made this much, much better. I just don't like that little random hole in the back of it. And this is yet another reason why lanyards are often a reason we can't have nice things. Anyways, I digress. Next thing, you are absolutely going to have to love this design. If you don't like a Quaken-style knife, if you're not quaking in your boots watching this, then this is probably going to be a no. This leans very heavily into that one aesthetic. And so, and that's true of a lot of knives, but this is very much a design piece first and foremost. Personally, like I said, it doesn't scratch my back particularly, so it didn't land right for me, but at the same time, that's a factor. Then finally, on the bad side, this guy feels a little bit slippery. What I mean by that, they've got some thoughtful jimping on the back here, which is good for deployment, and they've got the jimping as they need it here on the top for deployment again, but as it's in the hand, there's not all that much to grab onto. The burlap micarta gives you a little bit of texturing, but I kind of would have liked to have seen a little bit of jimping, fine jimping right here, just to kind of stop you from sliding up onto this blade. There is no blade guard here. There is really no nothing there, and so just a little tiny bit of something to make sure you're not going anywhere on this blade would kind of be nice, especially given that as you're choking up on this guy, it's kind of hard to realize, oh, okay, I should stop until you get to sharpening choil. So I would like a little tiny bit more texturing on here. It's not the end of the world. I'm definitely nitpicking, but at the same time, yeah. So a little bit more texturing sure wouldn't hurt this guy. And so to me, all of that is the bad, is that it's a little slippery. I'd like a bit of texturing on the bottom of the blade here. You have to kind of like this design. The lanyard hole is lazy 100%, and the price on it is not amazing, but it's fine. There's nothing ugly here, so let's go to the final conclusions, which is that this is actually a great knife in a lot of ways. It's a nice size, nice action, good deployment. micarta, that's really awesome. A classical design in a Japanese tradition and a really great blade. Sure, it's got a lazy lanyard hole. It's kind of got a love it or leave it design. The price is fine, and it's a slippery little beast, I think. But mostly, honestly, it's good. Reate has made a very, very nice little front flipper. They've done it at a price that's fine, and then hopefully we're going to have real availability of these guys. I mean, my hope is, because right now some of the very best, the biggest competitor to this knife in my estimation are these guys, the Pena Knives X series. This is a very similar compact front flipper style knife, and he's got a bunch of versions. He's got the trappers, he's got the, but they're also made by Reate. They've got a lot of very good similarities, and they feel similar in a lot of ways in terms of action. But the problem is they're not making any of these. They're very very hard to get. And so in a lot of ways, the fact that this is so rarely available has opened up the market for this. This is something that I think, if it's more widely purchasable, will, pull a lot of people away from that kind of thing. And that's great. But Pena, make more, please. Anyways, I digress. This is a very, very nice little piece here. And honestly, the biggest question here is going to be that style. For me, this was a little bit difficult for me as a review because I kept carrying it around because I couldn't quite settle down on it. It was something like, I kept feeling like, okay, I don't like this knife, but this knife is amazing. But I don't like this knife, but it's amazing. And I kept jumping back and forth. And what I eventually realized is it is purely a matter of style. I don't like the mini katana thing. The Kwaiken blade shape and knife shape has never really done it for me aesthetically. And so I think my bias was coming into play there in terms of, I don't like looking at this knife, but functionally it's an absolutely excellent piece. And so if you don't like that, you're probably also not going to like the knife. And so I think if the knife were a little bit more conventionally styled, I'd probably be even more over the moon. So my final conclusions are kind of twofold here. I mean, to start with, I really hope that Reate follows this up with a more traditional kind of version of this. If they were to take this same burlap micarta handle size and then just put a good old-fashioned drop point blade in there, or something like that, I am sure that they could be printing money. They would have this version for the folks who like this, but then they could do other ones. This formula here of a nice front-flipping titanium liner lock, nice weight, nice grind, nice blade, all of that, this could be absolutely great for them. And so I really do hope that there is going to be a follow-up version that is a little bit more traditional. It's maybe a little bit more in the classical knife-making tradition outside of Japan, because I think that would be a major hit. That said, the second part of my conclusion is, if you like this style, if you like this aesthetic, then buy this damn knife. This will be a gem for you 100%. They did great work here. And if you like this style, if you like it, there is really not much wrong with this guy. So this is a gem, but I hope they're going to make another version of it, but that doesn't reduce the fact that this particular piece is quite good. I'm going to stick around in my personal collection, but at the same time, I can very easily see a success in doing so. So there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, and most of all, have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.